This is a reminder that Dead Pixel Society listeners and readers get a $10 discount off the conference fee for the SPOA International Conference on School Photography and Yearbooks and the PhotoLinks MVP Conference. For more information, go to schoolphotographersofamerica.com/conference and use the code PIXEL10. Hope to see you June 7th through 11th in Houston, Texas.
Welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast, the photo imaging industry's leading news source. Here's your host, Gary Peugeot.
The Dead Pixel Society podcast is brought to you by MediaClip, Photo Finale, and Advertech Printing. Hello again and welcome to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. I'm your host, Gary Peugeot, and today we're joined by an old friend, Brian Solis, visionary, author, and business consultant and Salesforce Global Innovation Evangelist. Hi, Brian. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm great. You got the word old right. That's for sure.
Now, you and I met, oh my gosh, in the late 90s when you were actually doing public relations. That was sort of where you carved out the early part of your career. So before we get started into the contemporary stuff, let's lay the framework for those who may not have even been born yet or aware of what the digital camera landscape was at the time and what the Digita OS was all about.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Flashpoint. Well, hello, everybody. And Gary, always wonderful to see you outside of Facebook and, of course, our past memories. So in the 90s, digital photography was becoming a thing. And all the stories I still tell today about how a lot of this was transformative. And for those who don't follow my work or have any idea who I am, back in the 90s, I was a programmer who moved to Silicon Valley from Los Angeles in 1996. And I had this great big vision of just geeking out in Silicon Valley. And at the time, it was very enterprise hardware. And so in the late 90s, it was this really big shift from, the HPs of the world and the IBMs of the world and servers and Cisco technology to consumer-facing digital hardware and ultimately what would become Web 1.0 and the consumerization of the internet. Mm-hmm. And yep. Gary and I we met at this time when hardware and the internet were starting to merge together. And I think the market was 99.9% film sure. at the time. And the Digita OS was Flashpoint's a very ambitious attempt at creating what was the equivalent of Windows or Apple OS for digital cameras, to standardize cameras on a common platform so that software developers could take more than just the ability to capture a digital image, but to do more in camera, much of what we see today, for example, on our phones. Right. And I also, in that day, worked with Kodak. I worked with Ricoh. I worked with other software and internet companies like Club Photo, Smug Mug.
Still around.
Flickr, which I actually still use to this day, which is owned by the founders now of Smug Mug. Sure. And I wasn't just public relations. I was also this digital guy who understood the technology, but also applied my understanding of technology to humanize it. So it wasn't just about digital photography. It was the benefits of what digitization of photos were going to do for society, how bringing those images online were going to change society and how we interact and connect with one another, which would eventually become social media, and ended up becoming also an aspiring digital anthropologist along the way to make sense of how this was unfolding, the consumerization of the internet, how that was changing behaviors, and digital photography's role in all of that. So that's a full mouthful, but now we're up to speed.
Well, the thing is, I don't think a lot of people realize is in that era, it wasn't a given that digital photography was going to take off in the format that it eventually did. Because, at the time, hardware was very, very weak. In fact, you needed up until Digita and some of the other operating systems within the cameras, you needed a PC to actually process the file, right? You had to actually plug the thing. And so I know it seems kind of archaic now, but it really wasn't a given back then. So there's a lot of different attempts. But there was a vision even back then that digital photography in some form, whether it was going to be film being transferred to digital or something like that, was really going to enhance society as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And because there was the whole citizen journalism thing that was starting to happen.
That's right.
And transmission of images and things like that, which today seems kind of quaint, but at the time it was very, groundbreaking. Moving forward through the 2000s, how did social media affect photography as compared to the way it was to where it is, where it became?
I love, I'll bridge it by addressing one point that you brought up here, and then we'll go to the next, which was, as you said, digital wasn't a given. And that was really a lot of my work, which was not so much public relations as it was market cultivation, which was to help consumers and business users and everybody understand what we could unlock through digital photography that we couldn't with traditional photography. So it wasn't just, let's not just think about cannibalization, let's think about augmentation.
Right.
And where that got us to social media was sort of this interim step with, at the time when online photo sharing like Club Photo, Market Pioneer, came out with the ability to post your photos online. Nobody in their right mind was going to put their pictures online of their families and friends and most private moments.
Right.
And this is the late 90s, and social media really started to unfold around 2005, 2006. And I wanted to paint that picture for everybody watching and listening, that's how fast this went from all film to suddenly social media, sharing pictures online. And this is what's really important. I still teach this in my books and in my keynotes, which was, Kodak is often blamed for missing the boat on digital, but you and I were there when they had some of the best cameras on the market. Yes, they quite famously said they didn't want to cannibalize their film market, but I think the thing that Kodak, the way I talk about it as the new Kodak moment was, this is a lesson for businesses everywhere, and social media was sort of the catalyst for this, was it wasn't so much about being late to market, because certainly we've seen laggards come and go. Look at GoPro, right? They weren't the first to make a digital video camera. They just found their opportunity. But what Kodak missed was the evolution of the Kodak moment itself, which was one of nostalgia, one of memories, one of printed images in shoeboxes and albums, to what digital really did, which was it empowered consumers to take so many pictures of so many things that it shifted from memories to experiences. And then what social media facilitated was the sharing of those experiences in real time to keep up with as much and as fast as you were taking those pictures.
Right.
And so social media essentially was a renaissance, I think, for digital photography and digital imaging, but it was no longer as much about nostalgia as it was about experiences. And that was a milestone and a marker in the shift of how consumer behaviors and consumers related to photography, images, and community around those images. And I think what social media did for better was it brought us together around our experiences. It created interest graphs. It created, micro communities of people who shared the same passions and interests. Ultimately, what I didn't foresee, because I was a hopeless optimist, was how social media would transcend photography into vanity, narcissism, and a lot of things today that we see that's wrong with how this projection through photography, edited photography, I should say, is communicating to people how we're quote unquote living our best life, when in fact we're not ourselves in the photography that we represent, at least at a mass consumer level. Now, don't get me wrong. I also think, lastly, to your question, social media also unlocked things like the integration or the hybrid integration between digital photography and digital video, with hybrid DSLRs, for example. Like I still use my Canons and now my Blackmagics with my Canon lenses to do more than photography, but to also stream live video or to stream video in ways that I couldn't do before. So there's this magic of it, but also this completely new market for all of the things that have happened. And last bit, there's a big question, Gary, I know, which I think is for your listeners and those watching right now, was that all of these things also create new opportunities for businesses, for ecosystems, for markets, in that we haven't seen yet what's totally possible. The evolution has been fast, it's been sweeping, but it's still nascent, and it's still putty, and we get to form whatever ways we want it to go.
It's interesting you say it, because I was at a meeting a few weeks ago with what you would traditionally call camera stores, right? It was a meeting of camera store dealers. And a lot of them were talking about their customers, not as photographers, but as content creators, right? That was the language that they're using to adopt. And they're, putting in microphones and gimbals and all these other products around that. So I think the market's getting it, right? That they're seeing that there's a different level of visual literacy that's out there now.
Visual literacy. I like that. I really like that. It's true. In my world, I just call them creators, and those are folks that can go anywhere from Instagram to now TikTok. My goodness, talk about a next breed of creators to of those that we know from 2004 that are still thriving, like YouTube. But there's going to be a next TikTok, just like after Instagram there was Snapchat, and then TikTok came on the market. But what all of these platforms share and how they've all evolved is how a creator takes equipment to transcend that experience, whether it's content, whether it's live streaming, whether it's just full on cinematography, like we're seeing in like these mini movies that are now on TikTok.
I know, it's crazy.
It's absolutely crazy. And there is an entire market that isn't just for them figuring it out on their own, but for those who want to emulate them. And it's really hard. I'll tell you, as someone who's been in this game, but also as a consumer, for example, when I got my Blackmagic Pocket Cinemas, I how long I've been in this game. I still have a lot of the cameras we talked about earlier. I had to have someone show me how to translate the content from these amazing cameras into these new micro formats or these new media formats.
Right.
That visual literacy requires. You don't just know and go and grow. You have to continue to evolve if you want to be part of these new media experiences.
And what's interesting is it's almost equipment agnostic, right? I go to a conference and I put my iPhone 12 Pro on a gimbal and have a wireless mic, and I interview people, and it's golden material. I mean, in terms of the quality, of the video and the audio, and it's transparent to the user what type of equipment is being used, as opposed to, there wasn't a time we were long ago where you could really tell. Yeah, that was shot with a handheld, that was shot with a point and shoot, that was shot with a disposable camera, for God's sake. So I think taking that out of it has actually freed up some more opportunity for people, taking the hardware requirements out of it, per se.
Absolutely. If you look at first, Apple, if you're watching, could we please get higher resolution face-facing cameras? That is we've got to do that. Second, the wireless mic revolution has been transformative. Gimbals, of course, but Rode. I work with a friend of mine started a company called MicMe, MICME. They have just some of the best high performance cardio mics that you can take anywhere, including labs. Like, they changed the game for the quality and the caliber of content people want to create, essentially helping technology keep up with the imagination of the creator and the capability of all of these new platforms, which is just mind-blowing, right? We haven't even seen the extent of all of this. Right. But also, there's next-gen cameras out there too. In fact, Alex, who was one of the founders of Reddit, talks about a new camera that he just invested in that is essentially not your typical webcam, but it's your webcam that you can take anywhere that emulates like that SLR richness,
Right.
so that you don't have to understand all the geekiness of these higher performance cameras, but you can still have that look. And that inspiration was to sort of give that experience to everyday. Well, we live in a video first world now. So, what can we do to enrich that just traditional image that we're so used to seeing in meetings all day, and to make it more immersive? And then you add that with filters, and we can start to do great things. And I guess the long story short of that is what we're doing now as a result of COVID and video meetings and all of these new social platforms is unlocking imagination in how we work, how we create, how we consume media, where essentially everybody in their own way, shape, or form, whether they know it or not, is now in the video game. You're watching it, you're projecting it, and now you get to choose how you want to experience it and be experienced.
Speaking of experience, I know we're short on time here, but I want to touch on your last book, which is about how to experience your life, Lifescale, right? How to put all this stuff in perspective. So you were just mentioning we're inundated with content, we're inundated with video, we're inundated with images, but to some extent we need to scale back.
Yeah, in a couple minutes or less. Lifescale was my number 8 book, and it was not the number 8 book I set out to write. I was having a hard time writing book number 8, and I'd come off of 2017, 2018, my keynotes at South by Southwest and a couple other conferences around the world were increasingly focusing on not just signal to noise ratios in our life, not just the overconsumption or the fire hose of information in our lives, but the signal to signal and the intentional disinformation signals to signals and the constant distractions and using our phones and trying to keep up with the Joneses and likes and followers and all of these things. And I was constantly presenting new findings of what it was doing to us as individuals, as societies, as markets, how distractions were not the healthiest, how they were rewiring our brains, our bodies, how we were now changing our Maslow's hierarchy of needs to things that were more, as I called, accidental. We became accidental narcissists. And then also how that made us vulnerable to actually perpetuate the vicious cycle. And I realized that, I can't, I'm not just observing this. I'm not just studying this and publishing research on this. I'm also affected. I looked inside, I looked around my life and said, my goodness, my creativity has just dwindled. My ability to just keep in the zone and keep with deep flow was just rocked. My relationships were suffering, the ability to be present, to be not just present, with attention spans, but to be present, to be in someone's life. And that's when I realized like I also had a problem, but at the time there was not a lot of stuff about what to do about it. There was go to Burning Man or go to a detox camp or go to the Isalon Institute in near Big Sur. But those were all temporary solutions, little fixes. I decided to research it. Spent a couple of years just understanding first understanding what it's actually doing, so that you can make the case to say, hey, did you know? Or if you've ever felt, this is why. But then the rest of the book was dedicated to, here's what to do about taking control of your life in a digital first world without getting rid of technology. I mean, I couldn't get rid of my phone. I need it. I need it in everything I do.
Right.
So the thing that was really interesting was that it was awakening, but also empowering to then create a path, which is the Lifescale path, scaling your life forward with intent and purpose in a direction that you see today, but also that you can grow and scale over time. How you can use technology to actually accelerate and activate that new direction. And it's right here. I still read this book all the time because it keeps me on course. There's always new challenges. There's always new apps, new distractions. And there are always new things to do as you unlock the things you set out to do before. So that's Lifescale. And it is, the last thing I'll do is be incredibly honest with you, is that it didn't sell like my other books because no one, and still, it's still a thing. It's more important now than before, especially in this work from home world, that nobody knows they have the problem, right. Or that there is a problem, or that, all of these things that they do or don't do are the result of exactly what this is talking about. So it's been, the people who get it and the people who've read it, certainly just feel it, and they and it's been transformative to them. But I'm still on the bandwagon of trying to get out there and help people understand it's not just about the book. It's about just at least being aware of the fact that this is preventing you from actually being and living your best life.
If people wanted more information, where can they go to either learn about you or Lifescale or the Digital OS?
Speaking of Digital OS, I heard from Steve Saylor, who was the former CEO of that company recently. It was really nice to hear from him. And John Hoy from our Fujitsu days back then. Wow. Anyway, but you can reach me at briansolis.com or at Brian Solis on all the social platforms. If you're interested in Lifescale, or maybe watch The Social Dilemma on Netflix if you want to fast forward to see why you should read Lifescale. But Lifescale's on Amazon. All my books are on Amazon, or your local bookstore. Support your local bookstore. And other than that, if you ever have any questions or you just want to talk online, just I manage my own social media accounts. I'm the person behind it. I'm actually engaging with people still.
And you are, to your credit, you are responsive everywhere. I have interacted with you on, I think, 2 or 3 different platforms, and I don't know how you're scaling it, but you're doing it well because you're very responsive. All right, my friend, take care, and great to have you on the show.
Great to see you, Gary.
Thank you for listening to the Dead Pixel Society podcast. Read more great stories and sign up for the newsletter at www.thedeadpixelssociety.com.